Hey everyone, Pastor George here for our Theolog today on Tuesday. And firstly, I want to apologize for the horrendous lighting. I'm currently in the night sky of the Southwest as we prepare for VBS this week. Um, and it's just the way the room is set up doesn't allow a lot of light in, so I got this like natural glow on me. But it'll show how rinky-dink my operation is compared to Jordan Peterson's, who you're gonna see in a sec because he has a great camera and lights and professional setup, and I don't. And I wanted to respond to his message, a short response, because this is one of those things where I could do a whole long React video, but I think I just want to kind of focus on one area in particular. And 2 weeks ago, while I was on vacation, Jordan Peterson released this video called A Message to the Christian Churches. And in it, he presents a strong case that I think is mostly good as to the plight of young men in the world right now, and how the Christian church can do a better job of responding to that. But it has some problems in it as well. I'm going to link the full video below that you can watch. It's gotten a lot of views, a lot of interest has been picked up on it. Some people have written and videotaped responses, much more important than me. But I think it's worth thinking about because Jordan Peterson is a psychologist guy from Canada, and he has become famous in recent years for, I guess you could say, taking more conservative or traditional approaches to gender roles and things like that. And I'm not here to talk about that because that's not really what this video is necessarily about, or that I'm interested in. But he basically became famous for that, and he became really big for this one book that he wrote called 12 Rules for Life. And it's his whole project, or his whole thing with his public speaking, is he really relates to young men in particular. So if you have any young men in your life, like grandkids or sons or something like that, chances are they know who Jordan Peterson is, even if they don't like him or whatever, because he's had such a big impact on things. I was never that into him, but I think for some young guys, like, he really provided a good framework for how they should interact with the world, and he's big on being really forthright and things like that, and I think that can be good. And so anyway, he's a big deal. If you haven't heard of him, he is a pretty relevant person in today's intellectual landscape. And so he, over the recent years, has gotten a lot more interested in religion, though I don't think that, especially Christianity, though I don't think that he actually has any sort of personal faith commitment to it outside of understanding that it's just really important for Western culture. And in his video, he talks about the way that the Christian church can respond to these certain things that are happening with young men. And he has a big message to the churches at the end, like a more pointed one, where he tells us that we need to be way more opening and welcoming to young men, and how he thinks we can do that. And I'm not really here to critique it, because I think some of it's good advice and some of it's like, well, this is really easy to say if you're not actually running a church. But one of the things that he does say, though, is he has this message to young men, and I'll play it for you guys now so you can hear it, and I'll just respond to it real quickly. So this is him talking to young men who maybe don't believe in what the Christian faith has to say in terms of whether or not it's true. And so this is his message to them.
And here's a message to those young men skeptical about such things. What else do you have? You can abandon the churches in your cynicism and disbelief. You can say to yourself, narcissistically and solipsistically, the church does not express what I believe properly. Who cares what you believe? Why is this about you? Do you even want it to be about you? What if it was about others? What if it was about your duty to the past and to the broader community that surrounds you in the present? What if it was incumbent upon you and vital to your health and willingness even to live, to rescue your dead father from the belly of the beast, where he has always resided, and to restore him to life?
So you can see by his response that his big focus here, and I think this is a problem with a lot of other people who view the church as a cultural institution only, or a way to win a cultural war, is that, like, I think some of these things that he's proposing is good for young men. I think young women, for everyone of any age, because just being involved in the church is good because it brings you closer to God and you're doing the things that God desires. So even if you don't believe it, at least it's better that you're kind of following the rules, right? But the problem is, and I think that this is maybe why he takes later in the video a particularly poignant shot at Protestant churches over against Catholic and Orthodox churches, because Protestant churches really care, right? Like ours, really care what you believe. And that's what I'm going to say now. I really care what you believe. It would be really nice, and I think we all think this in some way, if everyone in our society, even if they didn't believe in what we did, just did what we believe is morally right. Yeah, that would be good. But at the same time, there's an inner problem with that, where if you build your faith upon sand, right, and you just say, well, there's this ideal society I want to get to, right, this ideal society that has these moral values, and the church is just a way of doing that, right, but I don't actually believe it, then I think we have a real problem there. Now, I still would love people to be involved in community and things like that, and I definitely think the church should challenge young men in this way and really call them to be consistent, be as stern as he is in that. I not just young men, to everyone. I think that's a really good thing to do. I think he's good at that. But I think, like, there are things that we desire. Douglas Murray is like this as well, another kind of thinker that is an atheist but really likes, like, Christian morality and, like, knows that the church is fundamental to the idea of Western civilization and things like that. But the problem is if you begin to cut away the actual intellectual roots of something, the rest of it is going to collapse. And I think he takes another aim at, like, I guess you could consider denominations like ours. At the end of the video, he says, stop caring about social justice and the environment. Right? That's pretty funny in response to, like, what GA was about, right? And focus instead on bettering your society in terms of, like, raising people in faith and things like that. And I don't think that's necessarily a wrong thing, because I think that we can get too involved in that, though the church should be involved in fighting for some social justice and fighting for good stewardship. But he's right in pointing out that shouldn't become our main thing. And when it does, it ends up falling into that. But the problem is that the reason it's fallen into that in a lot of mainline churches is because the intellectual belief in the gospel has been cut out, right? The intellectual belief in what the resurrection is, in what the crucifixion is, was gone, right? It stopped being a crucifixion for sins, and it started being a crucifixion against empire, or against the oppressive powers, or against capitalism, or against whatever, right? And that's exactly what Peterson does with a lot of his psychological training, is he ends up turning biblical stories into these bigger things, like the Tower of Babel is really against communism or Nazism. It's like, no, there's deeper sin and soul problems that the Bible is talking about. And if you lack that vocabulary, or they lack that understanding that there's really faith and real beliefs beneath this, it's not just the aesthetics, right? He lifts up Catholics and Orthodox of doing better things than Protestants, but the problem is that a lot of that is just aesthetics for people. They just like the idea of feeling traditional, especially the people that Jordan Peterson interacts with, but they don't really have the reason why. And I think that that's a big problem with the Orthodox and Catholic churches. And I think Protestantism makes this difficult, especially Reformed Protestantism like ours, because it really says, do you believe this, right? Like Jesus does in the Gospel of John, to to Peter at the end. He says, "Do you believe me?" Right? And I think that that's really what we need to focus on. I think it's really good to invite young men and challenge them and be like, "Hey, you can do better." Young women, everyone, right? But the problem is that we can't just assume that if we tell them, "Hey, you know what? Even if you don't believe it, it's better for you and your family if you do, and it'll give your life purpose if you just get involved in the church, even if you don't believe it," because that isn't going to pan out. It's not going to pan out for the church, and it's not going to pan out for people, because that's how some of the churches that are in the most dire straits got to where they are today. Is they just said, well, this is all just an intellectual exercise anyway, so let's just say we believe this stuff even though we don't. And then you kind of end up with a lot of really hypocritical actions. And so I think a lot of what he says in the video is good. I think it's a good challenge to churches. I think it's a good challenge to the young men who he's talking to, but it can't just be an intellectual thing. There has to be some real faith beneath that, or else the church will falter. So I just thought it was interesting, and a lot of people talked about it, so I wanted to give my 2 cents. I'll see you guys tomorrow for our Bible study, and I look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday for a mailbag. And I realized I got a few questions a while ago that I lost, but I've recovered them, so I'll answer them then. So I look forward to seeing you guys around this week, and peace out.